Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I'm showing this somewhat racist cartoon character here because I kind of want to have somewhat of a jovial racism on a topic that's not jovial at all. There was an old commercial, I'm showing my age here, where a Native American is walking down the street and there's a bunch of Americans partying in a car, throwing their trash out on the lawn, and he looks and he turns to the camera and he weeps. He weeps. That was the government trying to tell people, hey, can you not litter? It makes the Native Americans cry. It goes beyond littering, to be honest, but this commercial is getting at something. I would make the argument that the problems that we are having from the standpoint of climate are gargantuan, and we are providing little to no attention to it. It is almost like an illusion, or almost like it's almost like we're in a delusional state. You have an asteroid that's coming, and everyone else is just dancing as if nothing is taking place. The band will never stop, and yet the asteroid comes nonetheless. The people who we look to explain our world to us, to tell us about atoms and protons and quarks, to tell us about how those things come together, how tissue is formed, how muscle is formed, how those things work in the body, how medicine works in the body, how the heavens work, how the mechanical motions of the stars and the planets, conceptualize all those things and bring those things down into the understanding of the people who are walking around, going about, puttering about their day. You can even see it on the cell phone if you want. 99% of those people are saying that we are destroying our planet. We are destroying our habitable space. I've shown you one study after the next, the extinction event that we're in, this mass extinction that we're in the middle of. This idea that the amount of carbon that we've been pushing into the air has been squeezing the nutritional density of our foods, so making our foods less dense. I've shown experiments over the course of the year on all this stuff. I've had Guy McPherson on, who gave this doom and gloom story, but ultimately what he's saying is not completely different than what everybody else is saying. We are destroying our habitable space. Earth will be here. Earth is not the problem. Us, as living systems, have certain things that we need in order to live and to grow. Food, clothing, shelter, a sense of purpose. And not just a sense of purpose. I would even go so far as to say this kind of connectedness with one another. Paramount to that, however, if you're talking about a human being anywhere, you're talking about it living somewhere, which means it needs to have an area, a space, to which it can build and prosper. Again, Earth will be here. The problem is not Earth. This is something that hasn't happened before. One of my subscribers, Jeff Kuntz, sent me this. This is The Guardian. The oldest and thickest sea ice in the Arctic has started to break, opening waters north of Greenland that are normally frozen even in the summer. This phenomena, which has never been recorded before, has occurred twice this year due to warm winds and climate change-driven heat wave in the northern hemisphere. One meteorologist described the loss of ice as scary. Others said it could force scientists to revise their theories about which part of the Arctic will withstand warming the longest. Now, the reason why I'm showing this is because I've made the point over and over and over again that we can't look at what these guys are saying as estimates as being flat fact. They're estimates. There could be other factors that intervene and make this worse. And we need to regard it as such. This is a big fucking deal. When I say there's an asteroid that's about to hit the planet, I try to get across this dramatic flare that people can see it and do something about. While at the same token acknowledging that it's almost like you're being in a tub of water that's being heated up 1 degree over X length of time. Just because it's heated up slowly doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to cook. In the same way you're going to cook if you get hit by that asteroid. Trump is making this worse. But let's be very clear. This didn't start with Trump. Ultimately, this was one decision after the next, almost in this mechanistic way from the time of our inception. Meaning it's one thing after the next, after the next, after the next that leads us to this point. But we're getting to the point where there needs to be some degree of choice in the way that we go about our affairs. The problem here is not Trump or Obama or Bush, even though all of them, none of them actually was able to do anything to solve it, because this is a global phenomena. This phenomena doesn't care about your country lines, because those aren't real. It doesn't care about your cash. It doesn't care about the different nationalities and culture. It doesn't care about any of that stuff, because none of that stuff is real. All of those things are just human conceptions. Those are human mapping on the planet itself. Things that we've taken to be true, things that we've taken to be real, and things that our minds have kind of made almost solid. They're not. One president can't do anything about it because one president didn't start it. Fact is, all of us, as a collective, have engaged in behaviors that have propagated this particular phenomenon, and not just propagated it. It's worse than that. There's a kernel of logic in the way that we operate that makes this worse, but at the same token makes it somewhat anonymous in regards to the calamity. The nicest old woman that you would ever know goes to McDonald's, picks up a Happy Meal and a few hamburgers for her family. Now, when she does this, she doesn't care that the person who's standing there at the counter has been sitting there or standing there for God knows how long. It's cold because there's air coming in and out. Is getting cheated in her wages because her boss is making her work overtime but not necessarily allowing her to put it on the clock. And she's being forced to pay for her outfit, while at the same token being forced to smile because the company wants to put on a positive image. That nice old lady who's getting that hamburger doesn't care for that woman's well-being at all, nor does she care that that woman is barely getting paid minimum wage. What is the stress associated with barely making ends meet? Working a job that you absolutely despise. And not just absolutely despise, doing it not because you have a choice in the matter, but because you don't have a choice in the matter. If that makes sense. Take it for the moment from the hamburger that the person gave. This cow that's been standing in shit and piss for God knows how long, that has been disinfected with some kind of acid in order to get the fecal matter out of it and the contaminants associated with it, because that's where it's been standing. Or conversely, been standing in a pen where it couldn't necessarily move around all day. Nobody cares for the well-being of the cow. And not just nobody cares for the well-being of the cow. Nobody cares for the well-being of the food or the quality of the food. If they need to mix that stuff with pink slime, then they're going to mix it with pink slime. The goal of it is not to have the most nutritious food. The goal is to give her the least that she would be willing to buy. Because the least that she would be willing to buy is the most that he can reap and profits from the standpoint of the hamburger itself. Cows are the second leading cause of climate change. Or you could say animal agriculture. Not to mention the rivers of shit, literal rivers of shit associated with animal agriculture. That little old woman doesn't care about that at all. She's just going to take that hamburger, she's going to eat that hamburger, she's going to give it to her kids. Missing the point, the subtle point, that she may get cancer because of the shit they're putting into it, because they don't necessarily care whether she gets cancer or not, because that's far enough away from the inciting thing that you can't necessarily say this one particular factor caused cancer. So it doesn't necessarily matter to them. Yet and still, the shit that they've been putting in that sandwich may indeed over time cause cancer if people actually cared about looking into it and see whether or not this stuff caused cancer. At the very least, we know that those type of diets cause heart disease. It's suspected that those type of diets cause cancer. It's known that those type of diets promote atmospheres, or let's say promotes lifestyles that are not necessarily conducive to healthy living. She's going to give that to her kids. Do you know the most formative years for kids, I think it's like from 3 to 7, something to that effect. And McDonald's understood that if you can get a kid hooked between that time period, you can get a kid for life. I think it was like 90-something%. She's getting her kids hooked on something that they're going to have a cognitive addiction to, that society says is not an addiction because they just said it's okay, it's perfectly okay, it's just fast food. The chain of litanies, the litany of horrors that's associated with the nicest woman in the world buying a hamburger for her kids. This is a cultural issue. What happens when that sweet old lady take those kids to the movies? What are they going to go see? Is John Wick playing? I love my John Wick. What does it get across from the standpoint of if you kill somebody's dog or kick somebody's dog, you can murder a bunch of people? Our society is sick. We have a violent society. That's what I'm getting at. The problem with climate change is not any particular individual politician. It is the society itself. The society propagates a particular behavior that is detrimental to life on this planet. Western society calls this rationality. I think that's fucking insane. This brings capitalism into the idea of a religious belief, seeing as this idea that you're going to be in somewhat of a death cult in the way that you propagate your behaviors. There's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. Our society, our world, is sitting with our thumb in our ass. I do these stories. I don't do these stories all that often because these stories are depressing, because I feel like there's nothing to do with these stories. It's just this kind of an accounting of sorts, and me getting it off my chest. Greenpeace, none of these things will work in and of themselves. The issue here is culture. The thing that needs to be changed is how we go about our affairs. Yes, you can start with the capitalistic system. You can start with this idea of putting a profit over people and human beings. You can start with this idea of using technology for the benefit of human beings, as opposed to for the profit of a few. Yeah, there are ways to go off to try to head off that path. But we haven't even gotten to the basics of saying, hey, why don't we use technology for the betterment of all of us, as opposed to competing with each other with it. We're killing ourselves. Donald Trump is doing really horrible things. This is a catalog of Trump's horrors. But none of this started the problem, nor would the individual who would have been put into this been able to fix it. This is a depressing topic. Hence, the Native American to give comic relief. Thanks, guys.